Glorilla just got hit with felony charges, but not for what you think. While she was lighting up the WNBA All-Star stage, her Georgia mansion was being broken into. Armed criminals fled, but instead of chasing them, police turned their attention to her. Now she's facing up to 10 years behind bars, and the internet is exploding. Is Glorilla being punished for success or something deeper? Let's break down the arrest that shook the industry. The break-in that changed everything. On the night of July 19, 2025, Glorilla was on top of the world. She had just delivered a powerful performance at the WNBA All-Star Game in Indianapolis, thrilling thousands of fans and reminding the world why she's one of the most explosive rising stars in hip-hop. Her debut album, Glorious, had debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200. Her momentum was unstoppable, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. But just hours later, while the spotlight was still on her, a very different scene was unfolding back home, one that would change everything. In the early morning of July 20th, police in Forsyth County, Georgia, received a call about a burglary in progress. The address? Glorilla's own luxury residence in the gated St. Marlowe Country Club neighborhood. According to reports, 3 armed individuals had broken into the house. But this wasn't some random act of desperation. These intruders were calculated. They knew the house would be empty. They knew Glorilla would be hundreds of miles away. And they came prepared. Inside the house, someone fought back. Shots were fired in what neighbors described as a terrifying, chaotic scene. The suspects managed to escape without injury, and thankfully, no one inside the home was harmed either. But the danger was real. This was a high-level home invasion in an affluent community, and it should have triggered an all-hands-on-deck manhunt for the culprits. But that's not what happened. While surveying the scene, deputies claimed they detected the odor of marijuana. Instead of focusing all available resources on the break-in, they shifted priorities. A regional drug task force was called in. A search warrant was obtained. And just like that, the narrative flipped. From protecting a crime victim to searching for evidence against that victim. The burglars? Gone. The trauma? Still fresh. But now, the focus was on what was inside Glorilla's closet, not on who broke into her house. What started as a terrifying home invasion turned into something far more controversial. And for Glorilla, it marked the beginning of a legal nightmare that would unfold in front of millions. But the real twist? The worst part hadn't even happened yet. When the victim became the suspect. As the investigation unfolded, what should have been a search for the truth behind a violent break-in quickly morphed into something else entirely. Inside Glorilla's master bedroom closet, deputies claimed to have found approximately 2.8 pounds of marijuana and 2 jars of THC wax, a concentrated cannabis extract classified as a Schedule I controlled substance under Georgia law. Just like that, the case shifted. The headlines weren't about the armed suspects who stormed her home. They were about Glorilla. And here's the part that sent shockwaves through the industry. Glorilla wasn't even there. She was still in Indianapolis celebrating a career milestone, completely unaware that the place she called home was being turned into a crime scene, one where she was suddenly the suspect. Authorities argued that the presence of marijuana in her closet connected her directly to the drugs, but her legal team pushed back hard. Attorneys Marissa Goldberg and Drew Finling didn't just dispute the quantity allegedly found, they questioned the entire approach. They slammed law enforcement for what they called a misguided priority, criticizing how the discovery of cannabis had become the center of attention while the violent burglars were still at large. And they had a point. How does a police department justify pivoting from chasing dangerous criminals to criminalizing the person who was just victimized?
How does a search for justice become a drug raid? The optics were terrible, and social media knew it. The public outcry was immediate. Fans, commentators, and activists accused the system of using Glorilla's fame against her, shifting focus away from a home invasion to pursue a marijuana charge against a successful black woman. But the damage had already begun. Search warrants were executed. Evidence was logged, and the narrative in the media was no longer Glorilla's home broken into, it was Glorilla under investigation. The shift wasn't just legal, it was psychological. For Glorilla, this was more than an invasion of her home. It was an invasion of her image, her safety, and her reputation. And the moment she returned to Georgia, that shift would become terrifyingly real.
A shocking surrender and a viral uprising. Just days after the break-in, Glorilla made a move that stunned both fans and critics. She voluntarily turned herself in to Forsyth County authorities on July 22, 2025. Cameras captured her walking into the station with her head held high, not as a criminal, but as a woman ready to face a system she knew was stacked against her. Within hours, she was booked on 2 serious charges: felony possession of marijuana over 1 ounce and possession of a Schedule I controlled substance. The potential sentence? 1 to 10 years behind bars. And yet, she wasn't even present during the crime that triggered the investigation. The mugshot went viral. The arrest report spread like wildfire. But what ignited social media wasn't just the charges, it was the hypocrisy. In the eyes of many, Glorilla was being targeted, not protected. She had been the victim of a violent break-in, and now, somehow, she was the one being dragged into the courtroom. Her bond was posted the same day, $22,260, but the damage had already been done. Headlines focused on the drugs, not the burglars. News outlets framed the arrest as another rapper caught with weed, ignoring the deeper issue, how law enforcement flipped the script on a home invasion and pinned the spotlight on the victim. But Glorilla wasn't about to let them write her story without a response. She took to social media, posting a cryptic but cutting tweet. "They broke in my home, and y'all broke into my life, but I'm still standing." Within hours, it racked up millions of impressions. Fans flooded the comments with messages of support. Hashtags like Justice for Glow and Criminalized While Black trended nationwide. What was once a routine drug charge turned into a cultural flashpoint. And as the public rallied behind her, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about weed. It was about power, profiling, and a justice system that too often seems to punish the wrong people. But Glorilla's story was far from over, because this wasn't the first time she'd been in Georgia police custody, and the pattern that was about to emerge would shock even her most loyal fans. A pattern of targeting, and it didn't start here. If you thought this was Glorilla's first run-in with Georgia law enforcement, think again. Just over a year earlier, on April 16, 2024, she was arrested in Sewanee, Gwinnett County, this time after a routine traffic stop spiraled into another legal mess. It all started with what seemed like a minor offense, an illegal U-turn at a red light around 4 a.m. But when officers approached the vehicle, they claimed they could smell alcohol and marijuana. Body cam footage from that night would later go viral, not because Glorilla was belligerent or uncooperative, but because she was calm, collected, and trying to explain herself while the officers made up their minds. She admitted to having a legal firearm in the vehicle, acknowledged having a drink earlier in the evening, and tried to comply with the field sobriety tests. But no matter what she said or did, the arrest seemed inevitable. Officers noted her watery, bloodshot eyes and claimed she failed multiple field evaluations. She was arrested on the spot. The charges? Driving under the influence, possession of marijuana, less than 1 ounce, and an open container violation. Misdemeanors, yes, but stacked together, they painted a familiar picture. Another successful black artist treated as a criminal before being seen as a person. She was released on bond within hours, but the impact of that arrest lingered.
To some, it was just another example of law enforcement doing their job. To others, it was yet another incident of over-policing, of criminalizing someone not for what they'd done, but for who they were. A pattern was starting to form, and the similarities between this stop and the 2025 arrest were hard to ignore. In both cases, minor infractions were used as gateways to something bigger, and both times, Glorilla found herself fighting for her freedom while simply trying to live her life. But the pattern didn't start when she became famous. In fact, it went back much further, into a past most fans had never heard about, a past that shows Glorilla wasn't just a rising star, she was a survivor of a system that had been chasing her long before the fame.
From serial to CD scams, the criminalization of survival. Long before the sold-out shows, viral tweets, and Grammy nominations, Glorilla, born Gloria Hallelujah Woods, was already entangled in the justice system. Not as a superstar, but as a teenager, just trying to survive. And what happened to her in those early years reveals a deeper, more disturbing truth about how poverty, race, and punishment collide in America. One of the most shocking chapters, a story that started with something as small as a box of cereal. According to Glorilla herself, she spent nearly 3 years in jail for shoplifting cereal from a Kmart store. The claim sounded so extreme that many fans thought it was a joke until she confirmed the core of it on social media. While she later admitted to exaggerating parts of the story for effect, she never denied the arrest, the jail time, or the trauma that came with it. And that wasn't her only teenage brush with the law. Growing up in a strict religious household where secular music was forbidden, Glorilla and her siblings found a workaround. They began stealing Lil Wayne and Drake CDs from Walmart. They'd load the songs onto a PlayStation and listen in secret. Music became their escape. Eventually, her older brothers turned it into a small hustle, selling the pirated CDs at school. To some, it was just teenage rebellion, but to law enforcement, it was enough to mark her as a criminal. These weren't career crimes, they were acts of survival. Creative resistance, a young girl learning to carve out a space for joy and identity in a world that constantly told her she didn't belong. And yet, those early offenses followed her. They shaped how she was seen by police, prosecutors, even the public, not as a talented artist, but as a troublemaker, a record, a risk. So by the time Glorilla reached stardom, the system already had a file on her. And every mistake, real or alleged, was another excuse to drag her back down. But as we'll see, the higher she climbed, the more aggressively the system pushed back. Because Glorilla wasn't just a survivor now, she was a symbol. And symbols, in America, come with a target.
Fame, lawsuits, and the weight of being watched. As Glorilla's fame skyrocketed, so did the number of legal crosshairs aimed in her direction. And while her music lit up the charts, her name was quietly stacking up in court dockets across the country. Criminal, civil, and everything in between. The most devastating? Rochester, New York, March 2023. A joint performance with Finesse 2 times turned tragic when a stampede erupted post-show. 3 women lost their lives and 9 others were injured as fans rushed the exits, fearing gunfire. Glorilla wasn't charged in the incident, but lawsuits followed fast. People wanted accountability, and as the biggest name on the flyer, her name became a lightning rod. Then came Memphis, late 2023. A show devolved into chaos after a dispute in the crowd escalated. Police intervened. Glorilla was arrested again, this time for disorderly conduct and inciting a riot. Her team insisted she had no control over the crowd's actions, that she was simply performing. But that didn't stop headlines from painting her as the spark that lit the fuse. And it didn't stop there. In May 2024, Atlanta investor Aristotle Varner Jr. accused her of fraud, claiming she accepted over $400,000 for promotional services she never fulfilled. The deal included an Instagram collab post, an in-person meet and greet, and a recorded interview. Glorilla allegedly only delivered the social media post. The lawsuit described her as celebrity cocky, someone who stopped caring once the fame became too big to fail. Even her lyrics and phrases weren't safe. She was hit with a copyright lawsuit in late 2024 by Florida rapper Pies, claiming she and other stars copied lyrics from his old track. That case was dropped in March 2025, but another came quickly. Social media influencer Natalie Henderson sued her for stealing the viral catchphrase "No BBL" for use in a song. Every move she made was being watched, monetized, and litigated. And no matter how high she climbed, the lawsuits and charges kept pulling her back down. To the world, she was Glorilla, the hitmaker, the hustler, the headline. But to lawyers, she was a payday. To police, she was a statistic. And to the system, she was still that same girl they tried to keep in a cage.
Criminalized for success. The system was never built for her. Step back and look at the full picture. The break-in, the weed charges, the past arrests, the lawsuits, the viral mugshot. At first glance, it might look like Glorilla's just another celebrity who let fame go to her head. But dig deeper, and the truth is far more chilling. This isn't about bad decisions, it's about a system that was never designed to let her win. Let's get real. Glorilla didn't grow up with the safety net. She grew up in a world that punished survival, not just mistakes. From the serial shoplifting to the CD hustling, she learned early that getting ahead came with the price. And once she made it, once she climbed out of the mud to become a Grammy-nominated artist, the system didn't celebrate her. It tightened the leash. Think about it. Her home was invaded by armed criminals, but she's the one in handcuffs. She's the one facing a decade in prison for weed while the actual intruders are still out there, unnamed, uncharged, and uncaptured. Why? Because the justice system doesn't protect everyone equally. And when you're a successful black woman from the South who built herself from nothing, they don't see resilience. They see a target. The sheriff's statement said it all. We must uphold and enforce the law in all aspects of the case. Sounds reasonable on paper, but in practice, it meant criminalizing the victim while letting violent criminals slip through the cracks. And the worst part, Glorilla's story isn't unique. She's just the one brave enough and visible enough to fight back. To her fans, she's not just a rapper. She's a symbol of what happens when you shine too bright in a system built to dim your light. And every court case, every charge, every tweet is a battle cry. Because Glorilla's not just fighting for her freedom, she's fighting for every girl who grew up believing they could rise only to find out the world was already planning to pull them back down.
Conclusion: this was never just about weed. Glorilla's arrest wasn't just another celebrity headline. It was a warning shot. While armed criminals fled her home unnoticed, she became the center of a criminal investigation for being the victim. Her story exposes a chilling reality. When you rise too far, too fast, especially as a young black woman, the system doesn't cheer you on, it clamps down. From her teen years to superstardom, Glorilla has faced a pattern of policing, profiling, and punishment. Her case is no longer just about marijuana. It's about justice, perception, and power. She didn't stay silent. She turned outrage into impact. Her words sparked a conversation that reached beyond rap and into the heart of how America treats its rising stars, especially when they come from places the system would rather forget. The burglars may still be free, but Glorilla's voice is louder than ever. And now the world is watching. Who gets punished next, and who gets away?